The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone. We're just going to give everyone a couple of minutes for those late attendees to join, and we'll start in a couple of minutes. So just bear with us. So, hello everyone and welcome. Today, Bendigo Health will be talking about their journey with Converging Data and Splunk. My name is A.B. Olival and I'm Solution Delivery Manager at Converging Data. Excuse me. Before we get into the details of the presentation, I wanted to cover a few administrative aspects. All attendees have been muted, only the panelists can be heard during the session. However, we'd love to hear from you. So if you have any questions during the presentation, please type them in the relevant section of the webinar chat. It should be on your screen. We should have time at the end of the session to cover any questions that you've asked. If you want a copy of the slide deck and the presentation has been recorded, we're happy to share that with you. Just please let us know. And so for those of you that have just joined, welcome again. I'll run through what we plan to go through today quickly and then introduce you to the speakers. In case you're not already familiar with Splunk and Converging Data, we'll do a quick overview of Splunk and some of Converging Data's offering. Bendigo Health will then give a background of their situation and then describe why they chose Converging Data and Splunk. They'll go into the detail of how they've used Splunk, doing a live demo of the system and some of the key pages, looking at the visibility they obtained of a key application in their hospital, some of the insights they've gained into end user experience using Uber Agent, and the step up in the IT security and monitoring of threats within Bendigo. We'll then talk to some of the future initiatives currently being considered in healthcare at Bendigo and throughout Victoria and Australia, including understanding remote logins through Netscaler, how Splunk might help with WEIS or NWA funding, and gaining HL7 business insights. We'll wrap up by opening to all of you to address any questions you may have. So to introduce our speakers, we have Grant, who is Senior Systems Manager at Bendigo Health. He's got his hands dirty by getting into the weeds using Splunk. We had Bruce, the CEO of Bendigo, who was going to be joining us today. Unfortunately, he's not been able to due to some other important commitments within the hospital. And so Grant will be covering one of his slides, just talking about the background to Bendigo Health and some of the reasons they've chosen Splunk as a solution there. Richard Grimes, he's our product manager at Converging Data. He has worked closely with Bendigo Health during the engagement there. He'll give an overview of our services and talk to some of the areas where we see keen interest from the healthcare organisations in Australia and abroad. Fred Fisher is account manager extraordinaire at Splunk. He's worked closely with Bendigo Health and many of healthcare organisations in Victoria, understands many of their pain points. And Trent, you'll now give a quick intro into Splunk, so go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Abby. So the idea around Splunk, the two guys that started the business back in 2000, the problem that they were trying to solve was they wanted to develop a Google-like experience of where they could trawl through machine data and event logs to solve problems. So initially, Splunk was a reactive tool, but it enabled them to solve problems way faster than what they could historically do. So the power of Splunk is our collection of data from anywhere and our ability to search and analyse everything across that data gives organisations the ability to what we call gain real-time operational intelligence. Bing. All right, so from our infancy and just ability to collect data, that's obviously evolved over the last 17 years. So beyond that, we index the data into a proprietary, it's not a database as such, but effectively it's built on a flat file infrastructure, which allows us to scale almost infinitely. Our largest customers doing multiples of petabytes a day ingestion. So against that data that's ingested, we now give organisations the ability to search and explore, but then we move beyond that reactive capability where we can actually provide alerts and actions in real time. The enrichment of data comes from our ability to actually get data from all sorts of data sources, either within an existing or within an environment, but also from third parties. So we are an open API platform. We can collect data from applications, external data sources, and we can even enrich traditional structured databases, be it referential and transactional, to give real-time insights. Those insights can obviously be presented as reports or visualizations. Everyone is familiar with the concept of dashboards, so having real-time information on a dashboard is extremely powerful. But we're now moving into an area where Splunk actually has the ability to actually analyse and predict what's going to happen, and we can do that through our industry-leading algorithms around machine learning, but also extending into areas around looking at user behaviour. So traditionally, organisations needed to know what they were looking for with Splunk, but Splunk is actually so powerful now that we can actually identify notable events in those sorts of areas, even if the user or the Splunk administrator actually doesn't specifically ask a question. We scale out, as I said, so scale out horizontally on a flat file type of architecture. We can build full, highly available environments. The administration of Splunk is all built around role-based access controls. So you can actually determine who gets access to what data and what they do with it. Data security is obviously enforced, including full data classification, which is really important around storage, retention, and access. As I said, so we can integrate with a lot of applications, and our platform obviously delivers an SDK and API, which makes it really customizable and self-service orientated to deliver, again, operational intelligence back to the organisation. Next slide. So before I hand over to Richard, just to restate, so our ability to collect data can come from all sorts of areas. If you look at the left-hand side of the slide, we can collect data from on-premise, private cloud or public cloud, but equally we can run in those environments as well. So we can deliver a fully hybrid architecture depending on what your strategy and requirements are around infrastructure and storage management. And the data sources can come from all sorts of traditional environments, being storage, desktop, servers, security, networks, but we start moving into the more interesting areas around databases, applications, web services, smartphones, energy meters, RFID, and customer applications. So I'll hand over to you, Rich.
Thanks, Trent. So at Converging Data, we provide professional services to implement Splunk in a resilient, scalable way and to help drive business value from the platform. We also develop products, and these products aim to commoditize healthcare use cases to further improve Splunk's fast time to value in the healthcare arena. One such product, as indicated on screen, is the HICS connector, which is part of our healthcare intelligence suite. This allows Splunk to send and receive HL7 messages and thus fully participate in the healthcare ecosystem in real time. On the right-hand side, as Trent's already spoken to the left, so on the right-hand side, you can see connection examples from patient administration systems, radiology, laboratory, EMR, and these connections can be via the HL7 capability I just alluded to, or we can have direct database connects as just some examples of how we can consume that healthcare-specific information into Splunk. And using the healthcare intelligence suite, we can extend the Splunk platform to work more easily with healthcare data, which can then be bubbled up into other applications in Splunk, such as our patient flow app, which we have a small example of in the center down below. But here's a bit of a zoomed in version of this. Now, this is what's called a glass table in Splunk, and it's effectively a dynamic interactive dashboard that allows us to surface the information that we've consumed via any of the methods we've talked about before into something like this, which is a high level overall organizational performance view showing SLAs and KPIs in real time in terms of how you're performing and how the organization is tracking against those SLAs and KPIs. So while a lot of these might appear to be clinical in orientation, they predominantly are in the healthcare space, but these SLAs and KPIs may also be taking in components in terms of IT operations, like, for example, how a patient administration system is working, or the architecture that's supporting that and the infrastructure that's delivering that to the administrative staff, because they can't process the patients using the clinical IT apps if the IT operations are not meeting their SLAs and KPIs. So it can be viewed as a combination of clinical and IT ops metrics bubbled up to show that overall organizational performance. And so when you think about the Splunk platform and wanting to get it into your organization for IT ops use cases, but maybe funding is an issue, you can look at the angle of the application can deliver value in areas beyond just IT ops. And so there might be opportunities for clinical funding or support from other areas of the organization to allow you to get what you need for your IT ops use cases. A key mantra of Splunk is to ingest data once and reuse many times. So you may be ingesting data for clinical or IT ops use cases that can be used for the other use case at the same time. And another example of this would be security use cases. So we've developed a cyber security accelerator application, which basically is about getting started with security in Splunk and establishing a security posture by bringing information together from numerous different siloed systems. You already have your vulnerability managers and your endpoint protection. This will bring those all together and surface it in a centralized real-time way that's easily consumable and actionable. And it does so in a way that supports growth all the way up to Splunk's enterprise level SIEM solution, which is recognized by Gartner as a leading market SIEM solution. And CSA will provide dashboards, proactive alerting, and automatically update threat feeds in the background to address key areas such as ransomware, data exfiltration, account takeover, and cloud security. So at this point, I'm going to pass over to Grant in Bendigo to take us through what they've done, and I'll speak to you guys a little bit later.
Hi everyone, so it's Trent again. I'll take over this slide in Bruce's absence. So to give you a bit of an idea how this journey started, Bruce and I were talking in the second half of last year around some of the challenges that he had, not only existing, but also in preparation for the new hospital opening in January. So the challenges included just increased visibility and publicity that the hospital was going to get, which therefore potentially raised the risk of being a target. Other challenges were the hospital was delivered as part of a PPP. So not only did he have his own internal guys already managing existing infrastructure and solutions, but he now had to take on a whole new handful of extra gear and complexity that came with introducing new suppliers and relationships. Some of the other areas were, with all that increased load and complexity, it's just additional workload on a team that wasn't growing. So the Bendigo Health IT team was fairly static from a headcount point of view. So Bruce needed an opportunity or a solution where he could get some confidence and peace of mind that they would be able to handle the additional load, and using a platform like Splunk, be able to introduce some automation to save them valuable time. And so through that engagement, we developed a proof of concept, proof of value, which we ran for 6 months, which started around about the time that the hospital was opening. So the reason that Bruce chose Splunk is he recognised that we are the world's only truly universal hybrid platform for machine data, which would see him start to develop a strategy around consolidation, standardisation and automation. And through Splunk's relationship with Converging Data, as a partner of ours, they have arguably the strongest and most experience within the healthcare sector. So it was very easy for Splunk and Converging Data and Bendigo Health to hit the ground running to deliver some value almost immediately. Thanks, guys.
G'day everyone, my name's Grant. I'm the Senior System Admin here at Bendigo Health. And today I'd like to just go over 3 particularly valuable use cases that we've got out of Splunk thus far. Troubleshooting of problematic applications, end user experience validation, and my personal favourite, the security element. So approximately 12 to 18 months ago, we got a new clinical application centered around medical records. It's a very, very large, very complex application, had lots of moving parts, hosted with a public cloud provider. Right from implementation, we did not get the performance that we're after. Users were taking anything up beyond 5 minutes to log onto the app at some points. Lengthy delays navigating between the screen, not really what you want at a point of care situation. And not really good uptime either. Some vendors will promise you 5 nines. We would have been lucky to get 9 5s, I reckon. So instantly the blame game started. The vendor was saying, oh, it's an issue with your network between, Bendigo and your public cloud. So our ISP checked connections, didn't find any dropouts, but did find a very, very highly utilised pipe. The vendor then blamed the database latency. The vendor basically every fortnight would spin the big giant wheel of excuses and we get a fresh one. I was half expect to hear it's running slow because solar flares are in orbit this week. So that's the sort of finger pointing that tends to happen. So we needed a solution to cut through the noise. So Converging Data came on board and mapped all the components of our application into Splunk, things we cared about: network bandwidth, database latency, IIS responsiveness, and the client experience. And we got some useful insights out of that. I'll just flick over and show you. I don't have that exact dashboard with me, but here's something similar that we've mocked up based around our domain controllers. So the metrics that we care about. Our client experience monitoring found that each instance of Internet Explorer on our Citrix service was huge. It was averaging at about 4 gigabytes per session. Some of them were over 8 gig. So straight away, it was inefficient Silverlight coding. If you ask a developer, there's no other kind of Silverlight coding. So we had to increase the spec size in our Citrix service. So we did that straight away. We also were able to take that information back to the vendor and they did some recoding. Our logon time issue turned out was caused by each logon. Splunk was managed to tell us that each logon brought a 60 megabyte package down our WAN connection. Now, by itself, that's fine. If you've got 20 users logging on at once, it got crushed. Again, actionable info we could take back to the vendor. The vendor recoded what they did. It's now down to 3 meg. So our clinical application, which was the bane of our clinicians' existence, now works like a charm. That's a nice big win for IT to be able to fix something like that. And the tools used to work through that: the AEST, which I just demoed then, and Uber Agent. Uber Agent's installed on all of our Citrix servers, and it's sort of the fog light that reveals a lot of this info, and has uncovered a lot of useful insights for us. And I might just step through a few of them now, a few of the screens that we find particularly useful. This is my Citrix server fleet over the last hour. So I've got CPU averages, we've got disk I/O, which ones are working particularly hard. I should point out at this stage, this is all live data that we're working with, so I'm not entirely sure what's going to pop up on the screen, so this could get exciting. Common call we get on our help desk, oh, it's slow to log in. It took me 5 minutes to log in. Really? Let's check that. So this screen is how long it's taking users to log in to Citrix. So on average, 35 seconds. And I've also got a breakdown of what components are causing that to take long. I've got one user here who has quite rightfully reason to be grumpy. It's taken that person on average 102 seconds to log in. I can break that down further. So group policies, a bit of a bugbear there for me there. This screen tells me what parts of group policy are causing me growth. So based on a quick view of that, it looks like roughly 75% of all my group policy wait time is between other, group policy shortcuts and group policy folders. Group policy registry. So straight away, there's some items I can do to optimize group policy and get people logging on quicker. That's the sort of things I can go do right now. Browser performance. Because our clinical app runs in IE performance in Citrix is a big one. So here's every instance of Internet Explorer running across my Citrix servers in the last hour. I can see what an average is hammering its CPU. 9 News website with its back-end scripting tends to hit it pretty hard. Realestate.com also hits it pretty hard. So I can see if something's hammering away at the disk, I can pretty easily track down what's causing that. One that I found quite useful whilst I was prepping for this earlier in the week, I stumbled across one that I found was excellent straight off the bat. We've recently upgraded our faxing software here at Bendigo Health. And now when people are opening Outlook, it's taking longer than it used to. We've suddenly introduced a 3-second delay. And the reason it's caused that is our faxing add-in. So that's the sort of thing that would take me forever to find out without Splunk. And here I get it surfaced directly. So that's the rough take on the sort of info we've been getting out of Uber Agent. It's stuff that we can action rather than just admire. Dashboards are fine, but getting actionable intelligence out of them has really been what we've been after. My favourite part of Splunk so far has been the cybersecurity accelerator. Good information security is really difficult to do when you've got limited resources, limited both in terms of time and of money. I'm one of 2 senior sysadmins here at Bendigo Health, and we sort of each do a little bit of security stuff, but we don't have a dedicated security office, and there's no security roles here at Bendigo Health. So I imagine our security journey is probably similar to a lot of other hospitals. It starts at level 0, thoughts and prayers. You hope you haven't been hacked. And then the first thing you do is you put in the AEST top 4 controls. So you patch your applications, patch your OS, run app blockers, don't run as an admin. Easy, nice easy wins. Then earlier in the year, the AEST came up with the top 8. Also easy to do. Turn off your macros, get rid of flash if you can, turn on 2-factor, take some backups. Nice and easy, excellent. What's next on the security journey? The SIS top 20. Do some boundary defense. Audit all of your logs. Monitor all your user accounts. I've got no hope of doing that by myself. And my offsider between us, we do not have a chance of doing that at all until Splunk came along. So this is the cybersecurity accelerator, and this is my at a glance. How is my organisation doing? Data exfiltration. Where in the world are people logging in from? Now, as I said earlier, this is all live data, so I really hope that these demos are really boring, or else I've got some work to go and do. Oh, I've got a hit from somewhere in Europe. Cool. So I've got some failed logins. I'll just drill down into that and we'll see what's happened. So this is the Splunk query language, which you can then use to refine your query if you feel so inclined. Got to use a vdodgy. That I reckon might be worth checking out as soon as I'm done here. We're a regional hospital in the middle of Victoria. We don't, as a general rule, do a lot of business in London, certainly not in downtown Lagos or Pyongyang. When this alert triggers, in fact, I've just sent the email then, I get told about it. That's the sort of stuff that we really, really want to know. Sometimes it's a person on holiday. Sometimes it's a compromised account. Last week, I got an alert from our Director of Emergency Medicine. I thought, oh, that's odd. It's coming in from somewhere in England, but you know, maybe he's overseas. We've had a few staff travelling abroad recently. Wandered over to people in culture to find out if he was on leave and bumped into him in the hallway. Said, "You're not in Birmingham." He said, "That's a bit of an odd way to say hello, but no, I am here." So we could tell straight away that he had a compromised account. So he won a prize. He won a brand new password, never been used. Contact with ransomware infrastructure. Is any of my stuff talking to a botnet? Is it talking to something dodgy? Is it talking to some known bad actors? The weekend that WannaCry happened, this was the best thing ever. In addition to this cybersecurity accelerator, we also deployed a double pulsar detection script, which basically scanned all our IPs on port 445 and saw if anything responded with signs of infection. The peace of mind that I got on the weekend that WannaCry happened was the sort of money can't buy thing that I haven't been able to get anywhere else. My CEO would ring up, have we been hacked? And I could say, hand on heart, no, we haven't. Some other hospitals went offline, called in all their teams, called Code Yellow. I was slightly late for the footy that night. It was sort of the worst thing that happened to me. Account compromise. If you've got a user that, say, they're in finance and they generally log onto their desktop PC and they only log onto their desktop PC and that's their thing, and then the next day they suddenly log into 47 PCs, that's the sort of thing I want to know about. This will tell you. You don't need to tell it how many logins is normal. It will work out from your user data how many logins a user normally does. Then if they appear outside that standard deviation, it'll let you know. So you know where to look straight away. One thing I did want to finish on, Splunk is a bit like a box of Lego. You can feed it and feed it with all the bits you like, but to really get the value out of it, get yourself a master builder. We had another monitoring system dropped in by a different company last year. I won't name any names, but it rhymes with Ristom Renter Operations Manager. And the vendor didn't give us any handover, didn't really give us much beyond all right, here it is, off you go. We never used it. Converging Data has been absolutely exceptional with supporting us through our limited time and resources and getting great stuff happening out of Splunk. We've got some short to medium term stuff that we'd also like to happen. We're plugging our NetScaler logs in and our IIS logs. So that's not just for security, that's also going to be marketing metrics. How many users log onto a web pages from outside the greater Bendigo area? How many come from interstate? What session duration do they have? What pages do they tend to click through? NetScaler already captures all this data. Splunk makes it useful, particularly at our comms and marketing team. It's not just an IT tool, it's not just an ops tool, it's also becoming a proper information tool. We'd like to make some more ITSI dashboards for particularly our service desk. So start doing first call resolution. Our Exchange server had a bit of a blink earlier in the week. So instead of the head of the service desk coming in and asking, is Exchange okay? He can look straight away and go, oh, that thing's red. That's probably not good. And the other thing we'd like to do, there's a bunch of really useful Cisco plugins. We're at Cisco Shop predominantly. We've got ICE and we've got Call Manager. Ingesting all the logs from that's going to give us some great insights that we're really looking forward to. There's plenty of other opportunities for organisations in health that Richard will cover off now. And I'll just throw back to him.
Thanks, Grant. Okay, so Just wait for that screen to load. So like Grant said, you know, there's a lot of other data source opportunities out there, and while we're talking about some specific use cases today, effectively, if there's something in your organization that's generating or captured data, it can be consumed by Splunk, and we can go to work in generating some analytical insights out of that data. Some of the future targets for us that we're working on at the moment as well is around the areas of scoring, in clinical coding and funding optimization. So I'll talk about that one in a little bit more detail, and we'll also touch on some HL7 use cases and expand upon what we mentioned earlier around patient flow and also some theatre utilization. And you can also see on screen in the bottom graphic some geographical representation of HL7 data. So Splunk has a core map functionality which will allow you to start to visualize information, not just you know, in some of the other screens that we've shown you so far, but also in that detail level. You can drill right into those maps and see, you know, maybe how patients were admitted by postcode, etc. So on the clinical coding point, again, we can consume this information via HL7 or direct database connections from your existing medical record systems. There are just two methods of consummation that we have there. The clinical coding app, we've already started development with some of our clients, and we see this as a phased approach. So first phase in our development will be to assist coders in collating data. So we'll basically grab the information from the underlying systems. Again, it can be multiple disparate systems. We bring that together, bring those silos together and show it in one glass pane to that coder who's an SME and able to action that information in a knowledgeable way. The second phase would be then to have Splunk start to search through these large data sets based on specific dictionary terms and start to suggest codes that would be saving the coder time so that they can select from a short list and apply their SME knowledge to select the appropriate code at that point versus having to, you know, generate that list themselves. It'll be a time saver there. And Splunk will also be able to scan other similar events in the organization. So for example, you might have a case that was diagnosed as diabetes, and it should have been diabetes type 2, and diabetes type 2 might be a better coding optimization from a WEAST perspective. So we can start to get some good value there from Splunk. And taking it to the next level then, our third phase would be to use Splunk's out-of-the-box machine learning to allow it to start to learn from the coder. So as the coder takes these shortlists and selects which code it actually is by applying their very specific SME knowledge, the system will learn that and will start to incorporate that into its future suggestions to that coder. And so this is all supporting that coder and becoming more efficient. And so when you have to pay for these expensive resources to come in to the organization and help you with these kind of audits and coding activities, they are generating more business value for the hours that you're paying them to be on site for, etc. We also have developed a theatre utilization application with some of our clients in the UK. Now, this example is specifically around theatres, but it can be any resource in the organisation, maybe a radiology, X-ray, or any other kind of a thing that needs to be booked within the organisation. And so what this can do is highlight underutilization historically, so steps can be taken to address that. Maybe you have a miscommunication happening between your admin staff and your surgical staff, where a theatre might be getting booked for 3 hours but only utilized for 30 minutes. And there's obviously a 2.5 hour wastage there, which not only is causing the organization to not be recognizing revenue, but also blocking patients from having access to that. So there's patient concerns as well as operating efficiencies and financial issues for the organization. And this was found to be able to support the organization in saving millions of pounds a year before they had this kind of visibility. And it will allow you to also highlight upcoming underutilization. So see if you're targeted at hitting your forecasted utilization. So you're probably looking at running around like 80–90% utilization, and maybe your bookings don't indicate that. And so you need to take some steps to make sure that you're actually forecasting appropriate utilization as per your organization's goals. Again, all this information, once it's been consumed into Splunk, can be bubbled up to multiple different levels. And while this might be one level that you surface it so somebody who's interested in resource utilization can see, again, we can go back to that top level executive organizational view where you can see the whole organization, all those various different aspects bubbling up into single KPIs and SLA indicators. And this is an interactive dashboard, which is basic traffic light type color coding. So everything's green right now, but if one of these were to drop below a threshold that you've defined, it will change to amber and red. And you can click on any one of these indicators if they start to show problematic coloring or values, and you can drill in to another level. So for example, if there was a problem with one of the previous areas on the screen, you'd be able to drill into what is now a clinical workflow. So you can see that there's a clinical workflow that has a problem, and where in that clinical workflow is there a problem. So you can start to break it down and see exactly where the problem is. And I'll bring it back to the point of, maybe if your quick triage at the beginning is not under the organization's target of 5 minutes, maybe that's because the IT that's supporting that an administrative or clinical staff member to process those patients in that time is running slow or is having problems. And so this doesn't just have to be clinical workflow, it's about bringing the clinical and the IT ops together. You have that capability with Splunk so that you can see the whole visibility of the organization at that level and then drill into it. So again, if that organization little KPI was having an issue, you could drill in and see if it is the actual underlying infrastructure that's having a problem, and see if that's your specific issue. So I've spun through a lot of what we can do as part of our healthcare intelligence suite at Converging Data quite quickly, and I'm going to hand back to Abby now to summarize what we've covered, and he'll talk about some follow-ups. And so if you have any questions about anything that I've talked about, please feel free to reach out, and we'll take it from there.
Thanks, Richard. Actually, thanks to all our panelists for the insights into the implementation at Bendigo Health. To summarize, we discussed why Converging Data and Splunk were a good fit for Bendigo Health. Converging Data has expert knowledge with Splunk and healthcare, and there's Splunk's ability to get visual insights and alerts into and from the IT operations and the great apps that are available from Splunk base. Grant discussed their key patient information application and how Splunk helped them to solve some difficult, long-standing problems. He showed how Uber Agent helped clarify user experience issues, how it can show login times and issues with the applications, and how it helps first-level support understand and get to problem resolution quicker. He also showed how monitoring of security within Bendigo has been improved. Some future initiatives currently being considered within Bendigo were discussed and also across Australia, which should help increase IT ops and business operations insights. Converging Data's cybersecurity accelerator can help organizations implement a light version of ES, which is also SIM compliant and helps organization security grow with their needs to provide a top right quarter Gartner recognized SIEM solution, which can support larger SOCs. If you're interested in knowing more on CSA, this last slide has some contact details. Also, if you're interested in hearing more on Converging Data's healthcare solutions, have a look at our website. You can speak to Richard too, as he's suggested. Welcome to call him or email. Trent from Splunk can help with any of your specific Splunk queries and help you understand the licensing model. And Grant has said he's happy to answer any questions you may have, which you've not yet thought of. So coming to questions, so if anyone has any now, then please let us know. Type them into the GoToWebinar interface. We've actually had a few come through. So the first question, and Grant, maybe you can help to answer this one, is how much training does Splunk need to provide these abilities? In your experience, Grant, maybe you can talk to that.
Not a huge amount at all. We haven't done any formal training with Splunk. We basically sat down with it and played with it. It's a pretty straightforward follow your nose interface. It's pretty easy to click through things, like something pops up yellow next to a bunch of green. You click onto it, it tells you what's going on. And then there was a brief glimpse before of the query language. That gets pretty easy to work with as well. Down the left-hand side, there's a bunch of options you can select from, and you're basically just playing around with your data. If you already know what sort of data you've got, gets very easy to slice and dice.
Yeah. So Trent here, just to add to that. So from a Splunk point of view, there's a lot of support that we can give people as far as helping them get up to speed. So we offer free online training, which we call Fundamentals 1, which is a self-paced web training program that you can run through. Once you can complete that, then obviously there's Fundamental 2, which is a paid course, which will give you a certification. There's a whole heap of other courses that we can give around Splunk, from administration, architecture, focusing on some of the special apps. But other areas, if I use my experience with the application that Bendigo had, we started the build for Splunk in January, and it was within the first 3 months that the guys at Bendigo actually identified that Silverlight issue within the application with no help from us. So that they were getting some pretty big wins across the organisation very, very quickly. And another consideration is we do have an app store with about 1,200 apps or so. Majority of them are free, which will help you accelerate value out of the application purely by you ingest the data. The applications have already got the reports and dashboards generated, which will populate as soon as the data's ingested. Hopefully that helps.
So Grant and Trent, the person who asked that question has come up with a follow-up where they want to know more about the Splunk config training rather than the user training. Any comments on that?
Well, I think in this particular instance, so Converging Data, to be fair, absolutely led the implementation of the actual Splunk design and setup. But that actual process, so to build an environment which was going to scale to support like 100 gig or more a day, actually took less than 2 days to actually have fully completed, built, and in a redundant, highly available architecture. So it's pretty quick.
Yeah, and then I think during the engagement, we've worked quite closely with Grant and his team, and there's been a lot of knowledge transfer. I think that's happened. So hopefully that's prevalent in how Grant's spoken to the slides today and the demo. Okay, so we've had go on.
No, back to you.
We've had another question come in. Does Splunk have a two-way interface? For example, with clinical coding, can it update the source systems with the correct values, or can it only read them then suggest? And the users have to log into the source system and update them manually.
So I'll answer this question twofold. The first will be technically yes. So Splunk has the ability to interact with a database system and pull that information into Splunk and do all its good stuff there, enrich that data, and then feed it back into the system it came from. The caveat, which would be the second part of my answer, is that if we're talking about updating, medical systems, we just have to be careful around that area in terms of updating diagnosis codes and stuff via the Splunk interface. So technically we can, but we need to work through the organizational processes and procedures to make sure we're doing that in a safe way.
Thanks, Richard. So another question that's come in, is it possible for each hospital to deploy Splunk independently, then create an integrated community so each hospital could benefit in real time from other hospitals' incidents and threats? Maybe Trent, with your experience in healthcare across Australia, you can answer that one.
Yeah, so the idea with Splunk as a tool for each of the agencies is develop a federated sort of community. And it's even an initiative which ultimately could be led by the department as an example. So that because of Splunk's ability to actually get data and share data through APIs and with its own internal architecture, that's absolutely possible. So the idea that if there's a vulnerability or a threat or a breach in a particular hospital, then that experience and knowledge can be shared across the community in real time so that people can be informed and automations can occur to obviously mitigate that risk spreading beyond where it needs to be.
Great, thanks. Another question, this is great, keep them coming through, it's awesome. So can Splunk be used as a server queried by other systems?
Yeah, I'll take this one. And yeah, the short answer is yes. So Trent referred to Splunk being an open platform earlier, and there's a lot of published API and REST endpoints that you can query as part of Splunk, so that you have access to be able to run those queries remotely and consume that information into whatever system you wish to query it from.
And follow on to that, can Splunk trigger events in other systems?
Yeah, I'll take this one as well. So short answer is yes. The other system, obviously we need to look at its capabilities. If it's similar to Splunk has a published API, Splunk can interact with those APIs. We have examples of, for example, CRM, Salesforce type of interactions where they can be direct API type interactions to trigger events, or it might be email sending or SMS alerting that a system can receive, and as a result trigger an event in there. So it does depend on the other system and how we can trigger events remotely in that, but Splunk absolutely has the capability and we've experienced doing that.
So another question, the spike in power dollars in Victoria has blown hospital budgets considerably. How can Splunk help me recover or offset those costs from other parts of my hospital?
Yeah, so I can grab this one. So the idea of Splunk and its ability to collect data from anywhere also includes building management systems and those sorts of areas. So we actually have customers that are using Splunk in anger today, where they're actually monitoring attendance within rooms as an example, so they can see whether the lights are actually on or off, those sorts of things. The data around it also allows them to do analytics around who's actually booking rooms, consistent with the sort of idea that we mentioned around the theatre utilisation. What we can also do using Splunk as a real-time tool or platform is to actually look at heating within rooms. So you can actually look at the number of attendees, the lighting, the size of the room, and actually start automating actions through building management from a air conditioning point of view. So you can manage the heat, you can manage the cooling efficiently in line with what's actually happening. And one of the really interesting use cases that we have outside of health is a power company that can actually generate power either through, or it's a utility company that gets either power through the electricity grid through AMO or has its own diesel generators. And so what this organisation used to do is they would actually have to monitor the cost of electricity 24/7. So they were paying people to do that role, whilst they're also paying other people on standby ready to turn generators on or off when need be. So now with Splunk, they can get real-time feeds from the pricing of the electricity market operator, and Splunk will automatically determine when it hits a particular price point where buying electricity is no longer effective. It will automatically turn generators on because that's providing the cheaper cost of efficiency. So the idea there is if you look at the challenge within hospitals, we're keen to explore those sorts of technologies to potentially help hospitals drive efficiencies around those increasing challenges with operational power spend.
Okay, thanks, Trent.
So there was a machine learning question that came through as well, and it was asked, it was correctly pointed out, if Splunk is doing machine learning, then it needs training. And the question was, how does it understand new data sources? So a lot of the data sources that we consume within Splunk, there's a rich Splunk community called Splunkbase, where a lot of apps have been released which already handle a lot of the data sources that are out there, so they can understand new data sources. We've also expanded upon that in the healthcare space, so that things like HL7 and some other healthcare sources can be understood a little bit better. So that's how Splunk would usually handle new data sources, but you also have the ability to manually load up a data source, pick through the fields and alias or assign values to that information as you see fit, in the way that best fits your organization, so that it's consumed into Splunk in a way that users can ask questions of the data in a way that makes sense to them, not just in the way that the person who designed the application or who wrote that log file felt it made sense. And then when you have that information in Splunk and you want to use machine learning on it, you have the ability to feed a set of data into a machine learning toolkit, which will create a data model based on that information, create a model based on that information, and then apply that to future events of the same type. So we went down to Hacking Health last year in Melbourne, and with a 2,000 set of patient administration messages, so ADT HL7 messages, and 5 demographic points in each message, we were able to get 60% accuracy with the machine learning toolkit in terms of predicting where a patient would go to after the ED ward. So by doing that, we were able to give advanced warning to those wards to let them know that there's X percentage chance that a patient is about to come to your ward based on the diagnosis that they showed up with initially. And as the triage progresses for that patient, those diagnosis codes can be updated and the information enriched, and Splunk, keeping an eye on that in real time, can then in real time update the wards that are now a new target for that patient as the symptoms were better understood and the redirection of that patient occurred. So you feed in a certain amount of events, Splunk learns on that, and then it runs that knowledge against the future events, and you can continue to fine tune and continue to train if you're not getting the immediate results that you want.
Thanks, Richard. There's another one that's come through. Maybe Grant could have a go at answering this, otherwise Richard can help. So does a Splunk agent need to be installed on each BDI instance, or is it server-based? I think this is referring to the UB agent that we discussed earlier.
So the answer is you can pick. All the info I showed before, at Bendigo Health, we've got it installed on our Citrix host. And from there, all the info that I was showing off before came purely from having the agent on the host. If we really wanted to get tricky, we could chuck it on our thin clients and get things like connection data and boot times.
Great, and I'll just add on to that as well, Grant, that you have that option obviously with Uber Agent of installing a local agent onto central servers or individual desktops and endpoints. You also have what's called the Splunk Universal Forwarder, which can be used to capture information if Uber Agent is not in play. And in addition to that, you have Splunk's capability using a HTTP collector for these servers and endpoints to just send information directly to the ports that Splunk is listening on, and so not have an agent installed. And we can also do syslog capturing as well. So for some of the network devices and other devices that may not support installing an agent, we definitely have that capability to pick information up as it's sent to Splunk, or to sniff information off the network. So a range of capabilities to get that information in from those devices and endpoints.
Thanks, Grant and Richard. So another question. HL7 standards are rarely followed exactly. How do you deal with local variations?
Great question. So the HL7 standard is one of the most unstandardized standards that I've ever seen. And this is why I got really excited to start working with Splunk and the HICS connector, because my background is over a decade working in Cerner and IMDsoft and other healthcare vendors. And the integration projects are typically very expensive, requirements heavy, documentation heavy processes that result in an implementation that then somebody wants to change a week or two afterwards. And this might be because of a local variation, or it might just be because somebody didn't realize what the questions they wanted to ask until they actually saw the data. And so we've developed, along with HICS, a healthcare common information model, which allows you to apply aliasing from the HL7 PV 1.2 type naming convention to making it more about patient visit, identity number or patient name, those kind of human readable formats. But you can also have multiple aliases associated. So if one user in the organization refers to patient ID as ID and another one refers to it as patient number, you can have both of those aliases in there and have the various different users asking different questions of the data in a different format, but getting the same kind of answers. So you have that ability to alias and handle local variations without issue using HICS and the healthcare common information model that we've developed. And I'll also just highlight that as part of those HL7 projects, you usually decide what components of the HL7 message you wish to break down and write to the database. That's the receiving system. With Splunk, it consumes the entire HL7 message, breaks it down into all of its discrete elements, and stores that information for asking questions later. And because Splunk doesn't have a restrictive schema, it defines schema on the fly as you ask questions of it. If you wish to change the questions that you want to ask of that data, there's no problem with you doing that at search time versus having to re-engage an entire integration project because you didn't pull in a field that you needed or you didn't alias it in a way that you realized you needed at the time. So it's a very powerful ability within Splunk to be able to do that. And I kind of wish I had it when I was banging my head against the HL7 wall back in the day.
Great insight. Thanks, Richard. Another question, can it keep a snapshot of summarized results, or are the results derived each time?
I can take this one again. So the auditing capability within Splunk is not only the ability to audit external systems, but it also audits itself. So when you're running searches via the command interface that Grant showed briefly, it allows you to look in the audit logs, basically Splunk on Splunk. So Splunk is Splunking itself, capturing all that information and gives you the capability to audit who asked what questions of the data and when and what the results were that they got. Now, you do have storage considerations and retention considerations there as well. So you can decide that you want to keep all the questions everybody asked for 30 days or longer, maybe if there's medical legal considerations. But you also have the ability to only keep it around for as minimal amount of time as you want if you don't want to be using up storage. But the ability to audit that kind of information within Splunk is definitely there, and something that I have used numerous times to figure out what the query out was that I ran a few minutes ago when I forget.
Thanks, Richard. Another question, what has, oh, sorry, my screen just scrolled up. This is regarding FTE impact. What has been the ongoing headcount FTE impact, positive or negative, since the tool has been in use? Maybe Grant, you could answer that one.
Sure. So it's been in use for approximately 12 months. In that time, we opened a new facility, and our server fleet more than doubled, almost tripled. We've had no increase in staff to manage that. Our IT ops team has stayed absolutely static, but our workload has gone up significantly. And Splunk has been the way that we've been able to cope with that. We really wouldn't have had much of a hope without it.
Thanks, Grant. Another question, does it create metadata from queries to record data lineage to support auditability of summarized results?
Short answer for that is yes, and you'll also have the ability to create what Splunk refers to as summary indexes. So it stores all the information that it indexes in index data stores, and you have the ability to create summarized versions of those as well if you wish. And on a regular basis, you can run queries that summarize that metadata and make that available to you. But Splunk has its whole own internal metadata capability, so that you have that data lineage and you can have full auditability of what happened to the data since it came in to the system. And another good feature of that metadata is that Splunk allows you to query that metadata. So if you wanted to ask a question, for example, a very basic one of how many patients did we see last year, you could just ask that question of the metadata and get a response in seconds, sub-seconds, because it's just asking the metadata, which is a very small data set, versus scanning all the patient encounters and trying to count up all those encounters. So you have the ability to run some very fast, efficient searches using metadata. And then once you've narrowed down to the area where you want to go deeper, you can drill in then into the specific events that might take a little bit longer.
Thanks, Richard. And I think we've got time for one more question. How quickly can I get an initial deployment of Splunk up and running? In particular, if I focus on the CSA.
So our current offering around the CSA is a 10 to 15 day implementation. So that's work effort versus duration. So obviously, depending on your availability to work with us, because we do need some SME integration into the actual project, it would be 10 to 15 days of actual work effort from our perspective. We basically have a process and a methodology for implementing CSA. It's all about fast time to value and getting it in as quickly as we can. So you establish that security posture in a short, sharp way. And so we have a questionnaire where we show up and ask you about all the different data sources, about endpoint protection and web proxy details, and get all that information. And that then drives the actual steps we take as part of the implementation. So you're looking at that 2 to 3 week actual effort there. And I'll quickly just hit on one question that came through and how HL7 messages are stored. And the HL7 messages are stored basically in their raw format. So Splunk maintains the information that it stores in a raw format so that you have the ability to go right back to the point that it was consumed. And all the aliasing and all the the schema on the fly stuff that we talked about, again, is performed on the fly. And so we're not modifying the data in there. We have the capability to do that if you so wish, but we also, by default, just store that raw information, can refer back to that whole message and do whatever you wish to do with that message from the point that it was received.
Great. We've run out of time, unfortunately, and there's still a few other questions, and we'll probably come back to you separately. Again, if you just go up to the previous slide, Richard, the contact details are there. If you need to ask anybody anything particular, you're welcome to contact Richard, Trent, or Grant, or myself even. So thank you everyone for your time. We have a few events coming up for Converging Data, some new partnerships with Impinj, which is RFID and Internet of Things, with Okta, with Carbon Black. We'll share those with you when they're going to be happening. We look forward to speaking to you soon. So enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.